begin. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animation Station, Mr. Fantasy Animation, including TV and movies. I'm your host, Jackson Small. Welcome to our continued coverage of the Crow movies with The Crow City of Angels. A movie that a lot of people hate, and a movie that its own director and producer outright disown. But it's not bad. I walked in expecting a disaster, and what I actually got was something decent. It was a fun watch. It wasn't a good movie, no, but a lot like the third Candyman, it has some nice things about it that I can appreciate. So, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and dive into this review together. This one's going to be a lot shorter than the other one because my thoughts are a lot more summarized this time, rather than just a big, long explanation about why I don't like this movie or trying to elaborate on my perspective, like I did with the last review, because I know people were going to jump down my throat for it. But this movie does have a fan base, and I gotta say I'm probably one of them. So, here's my written review. Very surprised if you can't tell. I hope you guys enjoy. Not gonna lie, I expected a disaster walking in because of how much all of these sequels are publicly despised by both the diehard fans and the general audience. But to be honest, and I know how much this will upset people, I think I like this one better. It's not good, but I found more to appreciate here. Instead of it being soul-crushingly disappointing, it's actually pleasantly surprising. This film's okay. The pros, the villain is way better. Judas is a great villain. I loved this guy. He was so cool. He was so intimidating. His acting was a lot better than the guy from the last movie. And to be fair, it's probably because of the voice. Richard Brooks plays this part. For those of you who don't know who this guy is, this is the guy that plays Dwight in Bosch. This guy's voice is one of the coolest I think I've heard since Tony Todd and Keith David. His voice is very cool, and it really added a lot to the comic book-ism of this villain. I really dug this guy. I really like Judas. He might be my favorite villain of the series. I really enjoyed it. So, yeah, great villain, probably my favorite part of the movie. Absolutely. Acting from the main leads is solid. The acting is not 100% great, but you can tell everyone's trying. It doesn't feel like one of those movies where everyone's just phoning it in for a paycheck. And this movie had a pretty decently stacked cast, too, so that's impressive. They're definitely trying. The acting from the main leads are overall solid. The murder scenes are fittingly gruesome and has some pretty great on-screen gore, especially Curve, who gets the best death scene in the whole movie. Curve's death is awesome, is what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say why it's awesome, you just need to see it. It is awesome, it had my jaw on the ground, and it was one of the most symbolic and yet also brutally badass kills that I've seen in this series so far. Now, yes, I can't say it's as gory as the original, but it's admirably close. It does have a lot of gore in it. So, yeah, pretty great on-screen gore, and it's fittingly gruesome, and Curve has the best death in the movie. The emotional resonance is a lot stronger. It has some pretty cool ideas that helps it stand out. Vincent Perez is good enough as this newer Crow, because this Crow is nothing like Eric Draven. This is a completely different Crow. This is a mechanic who was murdered along with his son, and then he gets brought back to the living to kill those that took his son away from him. And honestly, there's a lot more emotional resonance with that. Is it a story that's been overdone 1,000 times? Sure, definitely. Is it following beats of the original? Yeah, definitely. But A, that's because of another problem we're going to get to later, and B, it's still legitimately interesting, and I also find that father-son connection a little bit more emotionally resonant than I do with a husband and a wife. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But I find it a lot more resonant, and in turn, I buy this Crow a lot better. Yes, his acting is not as good as Brandon's, but it's still worthwhile in his own right. He's a decent Crow. He's good enough for the movie, and he does do a good job carrying it. My chat will not shut up. Give me a minute. Mute. Message for 1 hour. Sorry, notifications keep coming up on my screen in the middle of a review. But yeah, Vincent Perez, I liked him. He was good as Ash. He was good. Only one character returns from the original, and is a lot better than she was in the original. If you guys don't remember in my initial review of the original, I said that the character of Sarah was boring. And I stand by that. In that first movie, she was just the boring kid character that just fit the role. Here, she's on her own. She's not stuck in Eric Draven's shadow, and she's actually the main focus of the movie. And she does a really good job. Now, granted, I think it's a different actress, but it's still really good, and they actually made me care about Sarah, so credit there. Credit there, they did a good job making me care about that character. The runtime is brisk at under 90 minutes, the pacing is quicker and way less agonizing. Thank you for not making this another dragged out bore. The symbolism of the Crow's mythology is visualized amazingly. Like, there were some scenes in the original that did that, but I argue here in City of Angels, it's a lot more profound. It's a lot more resonant. And to me, it just works a lot better. I know that probably sounds like blasphemy, but again, first time watcher, not a diehard fan blinded by nostalgia. Keep that in mind. Rewatchability is middling rather than low, so an improvement. Like, this is a movie I wouldn't mind rewatching again if I'm in the mood for a dark comic book movie. And the music is way better. Seriously, the music in the original was absolutely terrible. And this one is much, much better. Not only the licensed songs, but it has an actual score this time. And the score itself is gothic, it's dark, it has a choir, and it plays in the perfect moments that it needs to be played. Like, music is way better here. Isn't one of like the greatest soundtracks ever? No, but it is much better here than it was in the original. And yes, I will fight you on that. That being said, though, like I said, the movie's still not good. There's still a lot of problems with this one we do need to talk about. And it all starts with the fact that the effects are absolutely terrible. Not the practical gore. That stuff is really good. I'm specifically talking about the return of the abysmal green screen from the original. And keep in mind, this is on less of a budget than that movie was, so it's even worse looking than it was in there. And in there, it already looked bad. Here, it is back with a vengeance and looks even more terrible, and there's a lot more of it. Like, I can't overlook that. The green screening in this movie is still terrible. It was terrible in the first movie, and it's even more terrible here. So, the green screen, bleh. And that final scene using CGI. You know, like those really low-budget, crappy, bargain bin horror movies that use the most blatantly terrible CGI you can imagine? Yeah, this is that. This is a movie that has, like, one scene of CGI, and it is outright bad. Like, it is the one scene of CGI in the whole movie, but it's probably the worst scene in the whole movie. I can't really say why, because I'm trying to keep this spoiler-free, but it's one of the final scenes of the movie, and it is very bad. It looks very, very cheap. The rest of the acting is pretty hit or miss. The lackeys are fine, but the rest of the characters, I really did not care. The ending is very, very stupid. Like, the ending almost sunk the whole ship of the movie for me. It is bafflingly stupid, comes out of absolutely nowhere, and outside of like an itty-bitty little bit of foreshadowing in the very beginning of the movie, outside of that, you have no clue that what was even happening. Like, it was weak foreshadowing that led to one of the stupidest endings I think I've seen in a while. So, yeah, the ending of this movie is very stupid, and it almost sunk the whole ship. The cinematography is noticeably downgraded. I praised the cinematography of the original, and I stand by it. The original cinematography is probably a lot better. But in this movie, while it has some good scenes and does a good job showing like the dirtiness of LA, despite probably being filmed in Vancouver, it just doesn't have that same amount of visual flair that the original did. So that's the one thing I will say that the original did better, and that's the cinematography. The story, while it does try to be different, is still following the exact same beats of the original. And it's not David S. Goyer's fault. It's not Goyer's fault, and it's not Pope's fault. They wanted to make a completely different Crow movie, but the boneheads at corporate made them make pretty much the same movie again, but with few little minor differences that tried to show some of that creativity that they wanted to do. And this is compounded by something that the corporate boneheads themselves did, which we're going to get to, which is the worst aspect of the movie. But yeah, real shame it had to follow the same story of the original, with just a different character. The Crow's design, while not bad, is very cheaply made. I'm sorry, the Crow's design here, it doesn't have any of that quality of the original's design. And I'm talking mainly the face paint. And I get that's kind of the thing of the movie because it's being made by the paint that his son used to paint those little paintings in his workshop, but at the same time, it still looks very, very cheap. Again, that's probably a problem with the budget, but the design was cheap and the costume looked very cheap. So, that's unfortunate. And its biggest cardinal sin, and this is in my opinion the worst part of the entire movie, yes, even worse than the fact that this is produced by the freaking Weinsteins, the unforgivably horrendous editing forced by corporate boneheads that pretty much stifles any of the unique creativity that Goyer and Pope were trying to bring to this version, to the point of both of them outright disowning the thing because it's completely disrespectful to their original vision. I have no doubt that Goyer and Pope wanted to make something completely unique and different from the original, but the stupid morons at corporate decide to try and just rehash the original to replicate the same success of the original. And it is blatantly obvious. The editing in this movie is the worst part of the movie, because in scenes where it looks like it's going to go in a different direction and actually try to be its own thing, it gets roped back by that crap editing into just being another version of the same story. That is the most frustrating, stupid, contrived thing in the entire movie, and it pisses me off to no end. Like, just let these people make the movie they want to make and stop being freaking corporate morons. I hope that one day we maybe get to see an alternate cut that actually has the real movie that Goyer and Pope wanted to make, because I am genuinely curious about what they were going to do. And in the few flashes we got to see where this Crow did try to distinguish himself from Brandon Lee and Eric Draven, it was fascinating. It was interesting. I was engaged. I wanted to learn more, but editing's like, nope, gotta cut that out because now we have to keep rehashing the same story because we don't know a good story when it hits us in the head. Just corporate boneheads being corporate boneheads. In other words, Miramax just being idiots. Also, not the film's fault, but thanks to the Angry Video Game Nerd, we all know how bafflingly horrid its tie-in video game is. Like, oh goodness, who in the hell okayed that mess? If you want more context, go watch the entire Angry Nerd review. It's one of his Halloween specials, it's one of his best episodes, and it perfectly shows how and why the video game is absolutely horrid. Like, it is horrid. It is one of the worst tie-in games I think I've ever seen. Yes, Superman 64 included. It is awful. It is terrible. That game is shite, and I don't know who greenlit that freaking thing or who thought it was okay, but obviously it was people that didn't care, because it's probably going to be one of the worst movie tie-in games I've ever come across. Just, whoa. Watch the Angry Video Game Nerd episode, don't touch the game with a 10-foot pole. Overall though, I gotta say that this was the Crow film that was way more my speed, and I actually did have a fun time watching it. Sure, it's still not a good movie, unfortunately, but I think it does just enough to be passable. It's not bitterly disappointing this time, and it's not overhyped to high heaven, so maybe that's why I liked it more. And compared to that bitter disappointment of the original, much needed breath of fresh air. Seriously, the original pissed me off after how much it disappointed me. This one was a nice, pleasant surprise that was way better than what I was led to believe to be. So, yeah, give it a try. It might just surprise you as it did with me. It's definitely a very love it or hate it kind of movie. It has its fans and it has a lot of naysayers, but for me, I think you can put me in the fan camp. I don't think it's a good movie, but I do think that maybe on rewatch it can get a little better and better. And I do find more to enjoy with this movie more than to bitch about with this movie, which already, in my opinion, makes it way better than the original. So, with that said, let's get to my final verdict for Crow City of Angels. It's going to be an extremely controversial one, but again, it is my brutal, unbridled honesty. Final verdict for Crow City of Angels is a 5 out of 10. Yes, I know that makes it only 1 point over the original, but this one, I think I can watch more. I can watch it. It's watchable, it's passable, and it's a fun time. And I found myself more interested in what was going on rather than bored out of my mind. So, they did something right. But the decisions by corporate, that awful editing, and that absolutely abysmal green screen, just, I can't look past that. I can't. But I do say this is a movie that at best is a one and done. It's a movie that you give one watch, see if it might be your thing, and if it's not, that's okay. We all have different opinions. In my opinion, this movie's underrated. It's okay. I think it's worth at least one watch. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. Me personally, I'm not sure if I'll watch it again, but it is a better movie. And I will give it credit where it's due. It's better than the original. Yes, I said it, and I don't regret it. Fight me. Well, that's it. I guess until the next Crow review, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
We cannot take it anymore. The time has come.